Driven to Win presents Villette by Charlotte Brontë. In chapters 3 and 4, Lucy's quiet world begins to shift new paths, new people, and a feeling she can't explain. Let's begin. Chapter 3. The Playmates. Mr. Holmes stayed 2 days. During his visit, he could not be prevailed on to go out. He sat all day long by the fireside, sometimes silent, sometimes receiving and answering Mrs. Bretton's chat, which was just of the proper sort for a man in his morbid mood, not oversympathetic, yet not too uncongenial, sensible. And even with a touch of the motherly, she was sufficiently his senior to be permitted this touch-dot as to Paulina. The child was at once happy and mute, busy and watchful. Her father frequently lifted her to his knee. She would sit there till she felt or fancied he grew restless. Then it was, "Papa, put me down. I shall tire you with my weight." And the mighty burden slid to the rug, and establishing itself on carpet or stool just at Papa's feet, the white-work box and the scarlet speckled handkerchief came into play. This handkerchief, it seems, was intended as a keepsake for Papa, and must be finished before his departure. Consequently, the demand on the seamstress's industry, she accomplished about a score of stitches in half an hour, was stringent. The evening, by restoring Graham to the maternal roof, his days were passed at school, brought us an accession of animation, a quality not diminished by the nature of the scenes, pretty sure to be enacted between him and Miss Paulina. A distant and haughty demeanor had been the result of the indignity put upon her the first evening of his arrival. Her usual answer, when he addressed her, was, "I can't attend to you. I have other things to think about." Being implored to state what things, business, Graham would endeavor to seduce her attention by opening his desk and displaying its multifarious contents: seals, bright sticks of wax, pen-knives, with a miscellany of engravings, some of them gaily colored, which he had amassed from time to time. Nor was this powerful temptation wholly unavailing. Her eyes, furtively raised from her work, cast many a peep towards the writing table, rich in scattered pictures. An etching of a child playing with a Blenheim spaniel happened to flutter too. "The floor, pretty little dog," said she, delighted. Graham prudently took no notice. Ere long, stewing from her corner, she approached to examine the treasure more closely. The dog's great eyes and long ears, and the child's hat and feathers, were irresistible. "Nice picture," was her favorable criticism. "Well, you may have it," said Graham. She seemed to hesitate. The wish to possess was strong, but to accept would be a compromise of dignity. No, she put it down and turned away. "You won't have it then, Polly?" "I would rather not, thank you. Shall I tell you what I will do with the picture if you refuse it?" She half turned to listen, cut it into strips for lighting the taper. "No, but I shall. Please don't." Graham waxed inexorable on hearing the pleading tone. He took the scissors from his mother's work-basket. "Here goes," said he, making a menacing flourish, right through Fido's head and splitting little Harry's nose. "No, no, no." "Then come to me. Come quickly, or it is done." She hesitated, lingered, but complied. "Now, will you have it?" he asked as she stood before him. "Please." "But I shall want payment." "How much?" "A kiss. Give the picture first into my hand." Polly, as she said this, looked rather faithless in her turn. Graham gave it. She absconded a debtor, darted to her father, and took refuge on his knee. Graham rose in mimic wrath and followed. She buried her face in Mr. Holmes' waistcoat. "Papa, Papa, send him away." "I'll not be sent away," said Graham. With face still averted, she held out her hand to keep him off. "Then I shall kiss the hand," said he. But that moment it became a miniature fist and dealt him payment in a small coin that was not kisses. Graham, not failing in his way to be as wily as his little playmate, retreated, apparently quite discomfited. He flung himself on a sofa and, resting his head against the cushion, lay like one in pain. Polly, finding him silent, presently peeped at him. His eyes and face were covered with his hands. She turned on her father's knee and gazed at her foe anxiously and long. Graham groaned. "Papa, what is the matter?" She whispered, "You had better ask him, Polly. Is he hurt?" Groaned second. "He makes a noise as if he were," said Mr. Home. "Mother," suggested Graham feebly, "I think you had better." "Send for the doctor. Oh, my eye." Renewed silence, broken only by sighs from Graham. "If I were to become blind?" Suggestive this last thought, his chastiser could not bear the suggestion. She was beside him directly. "Let me see your eye. I did not mean to touch it, only your mouth. And I did not think I hit so very hard." Silence answered her. Her features worked. I am sorry. Then succeeded emotion, faltering, weeping. "Have done trying that child, Graham," said Mrs. Bretton. "It is all nonsense." "My pet," cried Mr. Home, and Graham once more snatched her aloft, and she again punished him. And while she pulled his lion's locks, termed him the naughtiest, rudest, worst, untruest person that ever was. On the morning of Mr. Home's departure, he and his daughter had some conversation in a window recess by themselves. "I heard part of it. Couldn't I pack my box and go with you, Papa?" She whispered earnestly. He shook his head. "Should I be a trouble to you?" "Yes, Polly, because I am little." "Because you are little and tender? It is only great, strong people that should travel. But don't look sad, my little girl. It breaks my heart. Papa will soon come back to his Polly. Indeed, I am not sad, scarcely at all. Polly would be sorry to give Papa pain, would she not? Sorrier than sorry. Then Polly must be cheerful, not cry at parting, not fret afterwards. She must look forward to meeting again and try to be happy meanwhile. Can she do this? She will try. I see she will. Farewell, then. It is time to go. Now? Just now? Just now." She held up quivering lips. Her father sobbed, but she, I remarked, did not. Having put her down, he shook hands with the rest present and departed. When the street door closed, she dropped on her knees at a chair with a cry, "Papa." It was low and long, a sort of "Why hast thou forsaken me?" During an ensuing space of some minutes, I perceived she endured agony. She went through, in that brief interval of her infant life, emotions such as some never feel. It was in her constitution. She would have more of such instants if she lived. Nobody spoke. Mrs. Bretton, being a mother, shed a tear or two. Graham, who was writing, lifted up his eyes and gazed at her. Lucy Snowe, was calm. The little creature, thus left unharassed, did for herself what none other could do, contended with an intolerable feeling, and ere long, in some degree, repressed. At that day she would accept solace from none, nor the next day. She grew more passive afterwards. On the third evening, as she sat on the floor, worn and quiet, Graham, coming in, took her up gently without a word. She did not resist. She rather nestled in his arms, as if weary. When he sat down, she laid her head against him. In a few minutes she slept. He carried her upstairs to bed. I was not surprised that, the next morning, the first thing she demanded was, "Where is Mr. Graham?" It happened that Graham was not coming to the breakfast table. He had some exercises to write for that morning's class and had requested his mother to send a cup of tea into the study. Polly volunteered to carry it. She must be busy about something, look after somebody. The cup was entrusted to her. For if restless, she was also careful. As the study was opposite the breakfast room, the doors facing across the passage, my eye followed her. "What are you doing?" she asked, pausing on the threshold. "Writing," said Graham. "Why don't you come to take breakfast with your mamma? Too busy? Do you want any breakfast?" Of course. There then. And she deposited the cup on the carpet like a jailer putting a prisoner's pitcher of water through his cell door, and retreated. Presently she returned. What will you have besides tea? What to eat? Anything good. Bring me something particularly nice. That's a kind little woman. She came back to Mrs. Bretton. Please, ma'am, send your boy something good. You shall choose for him, Polly. What shall my boy have? She selected a portion of whatever was best on the table, and ere long came back with a whispered request for some marmalade, which was not there. Having got it, however, for Mrs. Bretton refused the pair nothing, Graham was shortly after heard lauding her to the skies, promising that when he had a house of his own, she should be his housekeeper, and perhaps, if she showed any culinary genius, his cook. And as she did not return, and I went to look after her, I found Graham and her breakfasting Tita Tici standing at his elbow, and sharing his fare, accepting the marmalade, which she delicately refused to touch, lest, I suppose, it should appear that she had procured it as much on her own account as his. She constantly evinced these nice perceptions and delicate instincts. The league of acquaintanceship thus struck up was not hastily dissolved. On the contrary, it appeared that time and circumstances served rather to cement than loosen it. It was assimilated. As the two were in age, sex, pursuits, and sea, they somehow found a great deal to say to each other. As to Paulina, I observed that her little character never properly came out, except with young Bretton. As she got settled and accustomed to the house, she proved tractable enough with Mrs. Bretton, but she would sit on a stool at that lady's feet all day long, learning her task, or sewing, or drawing figures with a pencil on a slate, and never kindling once to originality, or showing a single gleam of the peculiarities of her nature. I ceased to watch her under such circumstances. She was not interesting, but the moment Graham's knock sounded of an evening, a change occurred. She was instantly at the head of the staircase. Usually her welcome was a reprimand or a threat. You have not wiped your shoes properly on the mat. I shall tell your mamma. Little busybody, are you there? Yes, and you can't reach me. I am higher up than you, peeping between the rails of the banister. She could not look over them. Polly, my dear boy. Such was one of her terms for him, adopted in imitation of his mother. "I'm fit to faint with fatigue," declared Graham, leaning against the passage wall in seeming exhaustion. "Dr. Digby, the headmaster, has quite knocked me up with overwork. Just come down and help me to carry up my books." "Ah, you're cunning." "Not at all, Polly. It is positive fact. I'm as weak as a rush. Come down. Your eyes are quiet like the cat's, but you'll spring." "Spring? Nothing of the kind. It isn't in me. Come down." "Perhaps I may, if you'll promise not to touch, not to snatch me up, and not to whirl me round." I couldn't do it. Sinking into a chair, then put the books down on the first step and go 3 yards off. This being done, she descended warily, and not taking her eyes from the feeble Graham. Of course her approach always galvanized him to new and spasmodic life. The game of romps was sure to be exacted. Sometimes she would be angry. Sometimes the matter was allowed to pass smoothly, and we could hear her say as she led him upstairs, "Now, my dear boy, come and take your tea. I am sure you must want something." It was sufficiently comical to observe her as she sat beside Graham while he took that meal. In his absence she was a still personage, but with him the most officious, fidgety little body possible. I often wished she would mind herself and be tranquil, but know herself was forgotten in him. He could not be sufficiently well waited on, nor carefully enough looked after. He was more than the Grand Turk in her estimation. She would gradually assemble the various plates before him, and when one would suppose all he could possibly desire was within his reach, she would find out something else. "Ma'am," she would whisper to Mrs. Bretton, Perhaps your son would like a little cake, sweet cake. You know, there is some in there," pointing to the sideboard cupboard. Mrs. Bretton, as a rule, disapproved of sweet cake at tea, but still the request was urged. One little piece only for him as he goes to school. Girls such as me and Miss Snowe don't need treats. But he would like it. Graham did like it very well, and almost always got it. To do him justice, he would have shared his prize with her to whom he owed it. But that was never allowed. To insist was to ruffle her for the evening, to stand by his knee and monopolize. His talk and notice was the reward she wanted, not a share of the cake. With curious readiness did she adapt herself to such themes as interested him. One would have thought the child had no mind or life of her own, but must necessarily live, move, and have her being in another. Now that her father was taken from her, she nestled to Graham and seemed to feel by his feelings, to exist in his existence. She learned the names of all his schoolfellows in a trice. She got by heart their characters as given from his lips. A single description of an individual seemed to suffice. She never forgot or confused identities. She would talk with him the whole evening about people she had never seen, and appear completely to realize their aspect, manners, and dispositions. Some she learned to mimic. An undermaster, who was an aversion of young Bretton's, had, it seems, some peculiarities, which she caught up in a moment from Graham's representation and rehearsed for his amusement. This, however, Mrs. Bretton disapproved and forbade. The pair seldom quarreled. Yet once a rupture occurred, in which her feelings received a severe shock. One day Graham, on the occasion of his birthday, had some friends, lads of his own age, to dine with him. Paulina took much interest in the coming of these friends. She had frequently heard of them. They were amongst those of whom Graham oftenest spoke. After dinner, the young gentlemen were left by themselves in the dining room, where they soon became very merry and made a good deal of noise. Chancing to pass through the hall, I found Paulina sitting alone on the lowest step of the staircase, her eyes fixed on the glossy panels of the dining room door, where the reflection of the hall lamp was shining, her little brow knit and anxious. Meditation. What are you thinking about, Polly? Nothing particular. Only I wish that door was clear glass that I might see through it. The boys seem very cheerful, and I want to go to them. I want to be with Graham and watch his friends. What hinders you from going? I feel afraid, but may I try, do you think? May I knock at the door and ask to be let in? I thought perhaps they might not object to have her as a playmate, and therefore encouraged the attempt. She knocked too faintly at first to be heard, but on a second essay the door unclosed. Graham's head appeared. He looked in high spirits, but impatient. What do you want, you little monkey? To come to you. Do you indeed? As if I would be troubled with you? Away to Mamma and Mistress Snowe, and tell them to put you to bed. The auburn head and bright flushed face vanished. The door shut peremptorily. She was stunned. Why does he speak so? He never spoke so before, she said in consternation. What have I done? Nothing, Polly. But Graham is busy with his school friends, and he likes them better than me. He turns me away now they are here. I had some thoughts of consoling her and of improving the occasion by inculcating some of those maxims of philosophy whereof I had ever a tolerable stock ready for application. She stopped me, however, by putting her fingers in her ears at the first words I uttered, and then lying down on the mat with her face against the flags. Nor could either Warren or the cook root her from that position. She was allowed to lie, therefore, till she chose to rise of her own accord. Graham forgot his impatience the same evening, and would have accosted her as usual when his friends were gone, but she wrenched herself from his hand. Her eye quite flashed. She would not bid him good night. She would not look in his face. The next day he treated her with indifference, and she grew like a bit of marble. The day after he teased her to know what was the matter. Her lips would not unclose. Of course, he could not feel real anger on his side. The match was too unequal in every way. He tried soothing and coaxing. Why was she so angry? What had he done? By and by tears answered him. He petted her, and they were friends. But she was one on whom such incidents were not lost. I remarked that never after this rebuff did she seek him, or follow him, or in any way solicit his notice. I told her once to carry a book or some other article to Graham when he was shut up in his study. I shall wait till he comes out, said she proudly. I don't choose to give him the trouble of rising to open the door. Young Breton had a favorite pony on which he often rode out. From the window, she always watched his departure and return. It was her ambition to be permitted to have a ride round the courtyard on this pony, but far be it from her to ask such a favor. One day she descended to the yard to watch him dismount. As she leaned against the gate, the longing wish for the indulgence of a ride glittered in her eye. "Come, Polly, will you have a canter?" asked Graham half carelessly. I suppose she thought he was too careless. "No, thank you," said she, turning away with the utmost coolness. "You'd better," pursued he. "You will like it, I am sure." "Don't think I should care a fig about it," was the response. "That is not true. You told Lucy Snowe you longed to have a ride." "Lucy Snowe is a tatterbox," I heard her say. Her imperfect articulation was the least precocious thing she had about her. And with this, she walked into the house. Graham, coming in soon after, observed to his mother, "Mamma, I believe that creature is a changeling. She is a perfect cabinet of oddities. But I should be dull without her. She amuses me a great deal more than—" "You are Lucy Snowe." "Miss Snowe," said Paulina to me. She had now got into the habit of occasionally chatting with me when we were alone in our room at night. "Do you know on what day in the week I like Graham best?" "How can I possibly know anything so strange? Is there one day out of the 7 when he is otherwise than on the other 6? To be sure, can't you see? Don't you know? I find him the most excellent on a Sunday. Then we have him the whole day, and he is quiet, and in the evening so kind." This observation was not altogether groundless. Going to church, then kept Graham quiet on the Sunday, and the evening he generally dedicated to a serene, though rather indolent sort of enjoyment by the parlor fireside. He would take possession of the couch, and then he would call Polly. Graham was a boy not quite as other boys are. All his delight did not lie in action. He was capable of some intervals of contemplation. He could take a pleasure, too, in reading. Nor was his selection of books wholly indiscriminate. There were glimmerings of characteristic preference, and even of instinctive taste in the choice. He rarely, it is true, remarked on what he read, but I have seen him sit and think of it. Polly, being near him, kneeling on a little cushion or the carpet, a conversation would begin in murmurs, not inaudible, though subdued. I caught a snatch of their tenor now and then, and in truth some influence better and finer than that of every day seemed to soothe Graham at such times into no ungentle mood. "Have you learned any hymns this week, Polly?" "I have learned a very pretty one, 4 verses long." "Shall I say it? Speak nicely, then don't be in a hurry." The hymn being rehearsed, or rather half-chanted in a little singing voice, Graham would take exceptions at the manner, and proceed to give a lesson in recitation. She was quick in learning, apt in imitating, and besides, her pleasure was to please Graham. She proved a ready scholar. To the hymn would succeed some reading, perhaps a chapter in the Bible. Correction was seldom required here, for the child could read any simple narrative chapter very well. And when the subject was such as she could understand and take an interest in, her expression and emphasis were something remarkable. Joseph cast into the pit, the calling of Samuel, Daniel in the lion's den. These were favorite passages Of the first especially, she seemed perfectly to feel the pathos. Poor Jacob, she would sometimes say with quivering lips. How he loved his son Joseph. As much, she once added, as much, Graham, as I love you, if you were to die. And she reopened the book, sought the verse, and read, I should refuse to be comforted and go down into the grave to you mourning. With these words, she gathered Graham in her little arms, drawing his long tressed head towards her. The action, I remember, struck me as strangely rash, exciting the feeling one might experience on seeing an animal dangerous by nature, and but half tamed by art, too heedlessly fondled. Not that I feared Graham would hurt or very roughly check her, but I thought she ran risk of incurring such a careless, impatient repulse as would be worse almost to her than a blow. On the whole, however, these demonstrations were borne passively. Sometimes even a sort of complacent wonder at her earnest partiality would smile not unkindly in his eyes. Once he said, You like me almost as well as if you were my little sister, Polly? Oh, I do like you, said she. I do like you very much. I was not long allowed the amusement of this study of character. She had scarcely been at Breton 2 months when a letter came from Mr. Home, signifying that he was now settled amongst his maternal kinsfolk on the continent, that as England was become wholly distasteful to him, he had no thoughts of returning hither, perhaps for years, and that he wished his little girl to join him immediately. I wonder how she will take this news, said Mrs. Breton when she had read the letter. I wondered too, and I took upon myself to communicate it, repairing to the drawing-room, in which calm and decorated apartment she was fond of being alone, and where she could be implicitly trusted, for she fingered nothing, or rather soiled. Nothing she fingered, I found her seated, like a little odalisque, on a couch. Half shaded by the drooping draperies of the window near, she seemed happy. All her appliances for occupation were about her. The whitewood workbox, a shred or two of muslin, an end or two of ribbon collected for conversion into doll millinery. The doll, duly night-capped and night-gowned, lay in its cradle. She was rocking it to sleep with an air of the most perfect faith in its possession of sentient and somnolent faculties, her eyes at the same time being engaged with a picture book which lay open on her lap. Miss Snowe, said she in a whisper, this is a wonderful book. Candace, the doll christened by Graham, for indeed its begrimed complexion gave it much of an Ethiopian aspect. Candace is asleep now, and I may tell you about it. Only we must both speak low, lest she should waken. This book was given me by Graham. It tells about distant countries, a long, long way from England, which no traveler can reach without sailing thousands of miles over the sea. Wild men live in these countries, Miss Snowe, who wear clothes different from ours. Indeed, some of them wear scarcely any clothes for the sake of being cool, you know, for they have very hot weather. Here's a picture of thousands gathered. In a desolate place, a plain, spread with sand round a man in black, a good Englishman and missionary, who is preaching to them under a palm tree. She showed a little colored cut to that effect, and here are pictures. She went on, more stranger, grammar was occasionally forgotten than that. There is the wonderful Great Wall of China. Here is a Chinese lady with a foot littler than mine. There is a wild horse of Tartary. And here, most strange of all, is a land of ice and snow, without green fields, woods, or gardens. In this land, they found some mammoth bones. There are no mammoths now. You don't know what it was, but I can tell you, because Graham told me. A mighty goblin creature as high as this room and as long as the hall, but not a fierce, flesh-eating thing. Graham thinks. He believes if I met one in a forest, it would not kill me, unless I came quite in its way, when it would trample me down amongst the bush, as I might tread on a grasshopper in a hayfield without knowing it. Thus she rambled on. Polly, I interrupted. Should you like to travel? Not just yet, was the prudent answer. But perhaps in 20 years, when I am grown a woman as tall as Mrs. Bretton, I may travel with Graham. We intend going to Switzerland and climbing Mount Blanc. And someday we shall sail over to South America and walk to the top of Kim Barrazo. But how would you like to travel now, if your papa was with you? Her reply not given, till after a pause evinced one of those unexpected turns of temper peculiar to her. Where is the good of talking in that silly way? Said she. Why do you mention papa? What is papa to you? I was just beginning to be happy and not think about him so much, and there it will be all to do over again. Her lip trembled. I hastened to disclose the fact of a letter having been received, and to mention the directions given that she and Harriet should immediately rejoin this dear papa. Now, Polly, are you not glad? I added. She made no answer. She dropped her book and ceased to rock her doll. She gazed at me with gravity and earnestness. Shall not you like to go to papa? Of course, she said at last in that trenchant manner she usually employed in speaking to me, and which was quite different from that she used with Mrs. Bretton, and different again from the one dedicated to Graham. I wished to ascertain more of what she thought, but no, she would converse no more. Hastening to Mrs. Bretton, she questioned her and received the confirmation of my news. The weight and importance of these tidings kept her perfectly serious the whole day. In the evening, at the moment Graham's entrance was heard below, I found her at my side. She began to arrange a locket ribbon about my neck she displaced, and replaced the comb in my hair. While thus busied, Graham entered. Tell him by and by, she whispered. Tell him I am going. In the course of tea time, I made the desired communication. Graham, it chanced, was at that time greatly preoccupied about some school prize for which he was competing. The news had to be told twice before it took proper hold of his attention, and even then he dwelt on it but momently. Holly going? What a pity! Dear little mousie, I shall be sorry to lose her. She must come to us again, mamma. And hastily swallowing his tea, he took a candle and a small table to himself and his books, and was soon buried in study. Little Mousie crept to his side and lay down on the carpet at his feet, her face to the floor. Mute and motionless, she kept that post and position till bedtime. Once I saw Graham, wholly unconscious of her proximity, push her with his restless foot. She receded an inch or two. A minute after, one little hand stole out from beneath her face, to which it had been pressed, and softly caressed the heedless foot. When summoned by her nurse, she rose and departed very obediently, having bid us all a subdued good night. I will not say that I dreaded going to bed an hour later. Yet I certainly went with an unquiet anticipation that I should find that child in no peaceful sleep. The forewarning of my instinct was but fulfilled when I discovered her, all cold and vigilant, perched like a white bird on the outside of the bed. I scarcely knew how to accost her. She was not to be managed like another child. She, however, accosted me. As I closed the door and put the light on the dressing table, she turned to me with these words: I cannot sleep. And in this way I cannot live. I asked what ailed her. Dreadful misery, said she with her piteous lisp. Shall I call Mrs. Bretton? That is downright silly, was her impatient reply. And indeed, I well knew that if she had heard Mrs. Bretton's foot approach, she would have nestled quiet as a mouse under the bedclothes, whilst lavishing her eccentricities regardlessly before me, for whom she professed scarcely the semblance of affection. She never showed my godmother one glimpse of her inner self. For her, she was nothing but a docile, somewhat quaint little maiden. I examined her. Her cheek was crimson. Her dilated eye was both troubled and glowing and painfully restless. In this state, it was obvious she must not be left till morning. I guessed how the case stood. Would you like to bid Graham good night again? I asked. He's not gone? To his room yet. She at once stretched out her little arms to be lifted. Folding a shawl round her, I carried her back to the drawing room. Graham was just coming out. She cannot sleep without seeing and speaking to you once more, I said. She does not like the thought of leaving you. I've spoilt her, said he, taking her from me with good humor and kissing her. Little hot face and burning lips. Polly, you care for me more than for Papa now. I do care for you, but you care nothing for me, was her whisper. She was assured to the contrary, again kissed, restored to me, and I carried her away. But alas, not soothed Dot when I thought she could listen to me, I said. Paulina, you should not grieve that Graham does not care for you so much as you care for him. It must be so. Her lifted and questioning eyes asked why. Because he is a boy and you are a girl. He is 16 and you are only 6. His nature is strong and gay and yours is otherwise. But I love him so much. He should love me a little. He does. He is fond of you. You are his favorite. Am I Graham's favorite? Yes. More than any little child I know. The assurance soothed her. She smiled in her anguish, but I continued, don't fret, and don't expect too much of him, or else he will feel you to be troublesome, and then it is all over. All over. She echoed softly, then I'll be good. I'll try. To be good, Lucy Snowe? I put her to bed. Will he forgive me this one time? She asked as I undressed myself. I assured her that he would, that as yet he was by no means alienated, that she had only to be careful for the future. Little Mousie crept to his side and lay down on the carpet at his feet, her face to the floor. Mute and motionless, she kept that post in position till bedtime. Once I saw Graham, wholly unconscious of her proximity, push her with his restless foot. She receded an inch or two. A minute after, one little hand stole out from beneath her face, to which it had been pressed, and softly caressed the heedless foot. When summoned by her nurse, she rose and departed very obediently, having bid us all a subdued good night. I will not say that I dreaded going to bed an hour later. Yet I certainly went with an unquiet anticipation that I should find that child. In no peaceful sleep. The forewarning of my instinct was but fulfilled when I discovered her all cold and vigilant, perched like a white bird on the outside of the bed. I scarcely knew how to accost her. She was not to be managed like another child. She, however, accosted me. As I closed the door and put the light on the dressing table, she turned to me with these words, I cannot sleep. And in this way I cannot live. I asked what ailed her. Dreadful miser, why? Said she with her piteous lisp, shall I call Mrs. Bretton? That is downright silly, was her impatient reply. And indeed, I well knew that if she had heard Mrs. Bretton's foot approach, she would have nestled quiet as a mouse under the bedclothes, whilst lavishing her eccentricities, regardlessly before me, for whom she professed scarcely the semblance of affection. She never showed my godmother one glimpse of her inner self. For her, she was nothing but a docile, somewhat quaint little maiden. I examined her. Her cheek was crimson. Her dilated eye was both troubled and glowing and painfully restless. In this state, it was obvious she must not be left till morning. I guessed how the case stood. Would you like to bid Graham good night again? I asked. He is not gone? To his room yet. She at once stretched out her little arms to be lifted. Folding a shawl round her, I carried her back to the drawing room. Graham was just coming out. She cannot sleep without seeing and speaking to you once more, I said. She does not like the thought of leaving you. I've spoilt her, said he, taking her from me with good humor and kissing her. Little hot face and burning lips. Polly, you care for me more than for Papa now. I do care for you, but you care nothing for me, was her whisper. She was assured to the contrary, again kissed, restored to me, and I carried her away. But alas, not soothed Dot when I thought she could listen to me, I said, Paulina, you should not grieve that Graham does not care for you so much as you care for him. It must be so. Her lifted and questioning eyes asked why. Because he is a boy and you are a girl. He is 16 and you are only 6. His nature is strong and gay, and yours is otherwise. But I love him so much. He should love me a little. He does. He is fond of you. You are his favorite. Am I Graham's favorite? Yes. More than any little child I know. The assurance soothed her. She smiled in her anguish, but I continued, don't fret, and don't expect too much of him, or else he will feel you to be troublesome. And then it is all over. All over. She echoed softly, then I'll be good. I'll try. To be good, Lucy Snowe? I put her to bed. Will he forgive me this one time? She asked as I undressed myself. I assured her that he would, that as yet he was by no means alienated, that she had only to be careful for the future. There is no future, said she. I am going. Shall I ever see him again after I leave England? I returned an encouraging response. The candle being extinguished, a still half-hour elapsed. I thought her asleep when the little white shape once more lifted itself in the crib, and the small voice asked, Do you like Graham, Miss Snowe? Like him? Yes, a little. Only a little. Do you like him as I do? I think not. No, not as you do. Do you like him much? I told you I liked him a little. Where is the use of caring for him so very much? He is full of faults. Is he? All boys are. More than girls, very likely. Wise people say it is folly to think anybody perfect. And as to likes and dislikes, we should be friendly to all and worship none. Are you a wise person? I mean to try to be so. Go to sleep. I cannot go to sleep. Have you no pain just here, laying her elfish hand on her elfish breast, when you think you shall have to leave Graham? For your home is not here. Surely, Polly, said I, you should not feel so much pain when you are very soon going to rejoin your father. Have you forgotten him? Do you no longer wish to be his little companion? Dead silence succeeded this question. Child, lie down and sleep, I urged. My bed is cold, said she. I can't warm it. I saw the little thing shiver. Come to me, I said, wishing, yet scarcely hoping that she would comply. For she was a most strange, capricious little creature, and especially whimsical with me. She came, however, instantly, like a small ghost gliding over the carpet. I took her in. She was chill. I warmed her in my arms. She trembled nervously. I soothed her. Thus tranquilized and cherished she at last slumbered, a very unique child, thought I, as I viewed her sleeping countenance by the fitful moonlight, and cautiously and softly wiped her glittering eyelids and her wet cheeks with my handkerchief. How will she get through this world, or battle with this life? How will she bear the shocks and repulses, the humiliations and desolations, which books and my own reason tell me are prepared for all flesh? She departed the next day, trembling like a leaf when she took leave, but exercising self-command. Chapter 4. Miss Marchmont, Dot on Quitting Breton, which I did a few weeks after Paulina's departure, little thinking then I was never again to visit it. Never more to tread its calm old streets. I betook myself home, having been absent 6 months. It will be conjectured that I was, of course, glad to return to the bosom of my kindred. Well, the amiable conjecture does no harm, and may therefore be safely left uncontradicted. Far from saying nay, indeed, I will permit the reader to picture me, for the next 8 years, as a bark slumbering through halcyon weather. In a harbor still as glass, the steersman stretched on the little deck, his face up to heaven, his eyes closed, buried, if you will, in a long prayer. A great many women and girls are supposed to pass their lives something in that fashion. Why not I with the rest? Picture me then idle, basking, plump and happy, stretched on a cushioned deck, warmed with constant sunshine, rocked by breezes, indolently soft. However, it cannot be concealed that, in that case, I must somehow have fallen overboard, or that there must have been wreck at last. I too well remember a long time of cold, of danger, of contention. To this hour, when I have the nightmare, it repeats the rush and saltness of briny waves in my throat and their icy pressure on my lungs. I even know there was a storm, and that not of 1 hour nor 1 day. For many days and nights neither sun nor stars appeared. We cast with our own hands the tackling out of the ship. A heavy tempest lay on us. All hope that we should be saved was taken away. In fine, the ship was lost. The crew perished. As far as I recollect, I complained to no one about these troubles. Indeed, to whom could I complain? Of Mrs. Bretton I had long lost sight. Impediments raised by others had years ago come in the way of our intercourse and cut it off. Besides, time had brought changes for her. Too, the handsome property of which she was left guardian for her son, and which had been chiefly invested in some joint stock undertaking, had melted, it was said, to a fraction of its original amount. Graham, I learned from incidental rumors, had adopted a profession. Both he and his mother were gone from Bretton and were understood to be now in London. Thus there remained no possibility of dependence on others. To myself alone could I look. I know not that I was of a self-reliant or active nature, but self-reliance and exertion were forced upon me by circumstances, as they are upon thousands besides. And when Miss Marchmont, a maiden lady of our neighborhood, sent for me, I obeyed her behest, in the hope that she might assign me some task I could undertake. Miss Marchmont was a woman of fortune and lived in a handsome residence. But she was a rheumatic cripple, impotent foot and hand, and had been so for 20 years. She always sat upstairs. Her drawing room adjoined her bedroom. I had often heard of Miss Marchmont, and of her peculiarities. She had the character of being very eccentric, but till now had never seen her. I found her a furrowed, gray-haired woman, grave with solitude, stern with long affliction, irritable, also, and perhaps exacting. It seemed that a maid, or rather companion, who had waited on her for some years, was about to be married, and she, hearing of my bereaved lot, had sent for me, with the idea that I might supply this person's place. She made the proposal to me after tea, as she and I sat alone by her fireside. "It will not be an easy life," said she candidly, "for I require a good deal of attention, and you will be much confined. Yet, perhaps, contrasted with the existence you have lately led, it may appear tolerable." I reflected. Of course it ought to appear tolerable, I argued inwardly, but somehow, by some strange fatality, it would not. To live here, in this close room, the watcher of suffering sometimes, perhaps the butt of temper through all that, was to come of my youth, while all that was gone had passed, to say the least, not blissfully. My heart sunk one moment, then it revived. For though I forced myself to realize evils, I think I was too prosaic to idealize, and consequently to exaggerate them. My doubt is whether I should have strength for the undertaking, I observed. "That is my own scruple," said she, "for you look a worn-out creature." So I did. I saw myself in the glass, in my morning dress, a faded, hollow-eyed vision, yet I thought little of the wan spectacle. The blight, I believed, was chiefly external. I still felt life at life's sources. What else have you in view? Anything? Nothing. Clear as yet, but I may find something. So you imagine, perhaps you are right. Try your own method, then. And if it does not succeed, test mine. The chance I have offered shall be left open to you for 3 months. This was kind. I told her so and expressed my gratitude. While I was speaking, a paroxysm of pain came on. I ministered to her, made the necessary applications according to her directions, and by the time she was relieved, a sort of intimacy was already formed between us. I, for my part, had learned from the manner in which she bore this attack that she was a firm, patient woman, patient under physical pain, though sometimes perhaps excitable under long mental canker. And she, from the goodwill with which I succored her, discovered that she could influence my sympathies, such as they were. She sent for me the next day. For 5 or 6 successive days she claimed my company. Closer acquaintance, while it developed both faults and eccentricities, opened at the same time a view of a character I could respect. Stern and even morose as she sometimes was, I could wait on her and sit beside her with that calm which always blesses us when we are sensible that our manners, presence, contact please and soothe the persons we serve. Even when she scolded me, which she did now and then, very tartly, it was in such a way as did not humiliate and left no sting. It was rather like an irascible mother rating her daughter than a harsh mistress lecturing a dependent. Lecture? Indeed, she could not, though she could occasionally storm. Moreover, a vein of reason ever ran through her passion. She was logical, even when fierce. Ere long, a growing sense of attachment began to present the thought of staying with her as companion in quite a new light. In another week, I had agreed to remain. 2 hot, close rooms thus became my world, and a crippled woman, my mistress, my friend, my all. Her service was my duty, her pain, my suffering, her relief, my hope, her anger, my punishment, her regard, my reward. I forgot that there were fields, woods, rivers, seas, an ever-changing sky outside the steam-dimmed lattice of this sick chamber. I was almost content to forget it. All within me became narrowed to my lot. Tame and still by habit, disciplined by destiny, I demanded no walks in the fresh air. My appetite needed no more than the tiny messes served for the invalid. In addition, she gave me the originality of her character to study, the steadiness. Of her virtues, I will add the power of her passions to admire, the truth of her feelings to trust. All these things she had, and for these things I clung to her. For these things I would have crawled on with her for 20 years. If for 20 years longer her life of endurance had been protracted. But another decree was written. It seemed I must be stimulated into action. I must be goaded, driven, stung, forced to energy. My little morsel of human affection, which I prized as if it were a solid pearl, must melt in my fingers and slip thence like a dissolving hailstone. My small adopted duty must be snatched from my easily contented conscience. I had wanted to compromise with fate, to escape occasional great agonies by submitting to a whole life of privation and small pains. Fate would not so be pacified, nor would Providence sanction this shrinking sloth and cowardly indolence. One February night, I remember it well, there came a voice near Miss Marchmont's house, heard by every inmate, but translated, perhaps, only by one. After a calm winter, storms were ushering in the spring. I had put Miss Marchmont to bed. I sat at the fireside sewing. The wind was wailing at the windows. It had wailed all day, but as night deepened, it took a new tone, an accent keen, piercing, almost articulate to the ear. A plaint piteous and disconsolate to the nerves, trilled in every gust. Oh, hush, hush, I said in my disturbed mind, dropping my work and making a vain effort to stop my ears against that subtle, searching cry. I had heard that very voice ere this, and compulsory observation had forced on me a theory as to what it boded. 3 times in the course of my life, events had taught me that these strange accents in the storm, this restless, Hopeless cry denote a coming state of the atmosphere unpropitious to life. Epidemic diseases, I believed, were often heralded by a gasping, sobbing, tormented, long-lamenting east wind. Hence, I inferred, arose the legend of the banshee. I fancied, too. I had noticed, but was not philosopher enough to know whether there was any connection between the circumstances that we often at the same time hear of disturbed volcanic action in distant parts of the world, of rivers suddenly rushing above their banks, and of strange high tides flowing furiously in on low sea coasts. Our globe, I had said to myself, seems at such periods torn and disordered. The feeble amongst us wither in her distempered breath, rushing, hot from steaming volcanoes. I listened and trembled. Miss Marchmont slept aught about midnight. The storm in 1/2 hour fell to a dead calm. The fire, which had been burning dead, glowed up vividly. I felt the air change and become keen. Raising blind and curtain, I looked out and saw in the stars the keen sparkle of a sharp frost. Turning away, the object that met my eyes was Miss Marchmont awake, lifting her head from the pillow and regarding me with unusual earnestness. "Is it a fine night?" she asked. I replied in the affirmative. "I thought so," she said, "for I feel so strong, so well. Raise me." "I feel young tonight," she continued, "young, light-hearted, and happy. What if my complaint be about to take a turn, and I am yet destined to enjoy health? It would be a miracle. And these are not the days of miracles," I thought to myself, and wondered to hear her talk so. She went on directing her conversation to the past, and seeming to recall its incidents, scenes, and personages with singular vividness. "I love memory tonight," she said. "I prize her as my best friend. She is just now giving me a deep delight. She is bringing back to my heart, in warm and beautiful life, realities, not mere empty ideas, but what were once realities, and that I long have thought decayed, dissolved, mixed in with grave mold. I possess just now the hours, the thoughts, the hopes of my youth. I renew the love of my life, its only love, almost its only affection. For I am not a particularly good woman, I am not amiable. Yet I have had my feelings, strong and concentrated. And these feelings had their object, which in its single self was dear to me as to the majority of men and women, are all the unnumbered points on which they dissipate their regard. While I loved, and while I was loved, what an existence I enjoyed. What a glorious year I can recall, how bright it comes back to me. What a living spring, what a warm, glad summer, what soft moonlight, silvering the autumn evenings, what strength of hope under the ice-bound waters and frost-hoar fields of that year's winter. Through that year my heart lived with Frank's heart. Oh, my noble Frank, my faithful Frank, my good Frank. So much better than myself, his standard in all things so much higher. This I can now see and say, if few women have suffered as I did in his loss, few have enjoyed what I did in his love. It was a far better kind of love than common. I had no doubts about it or him. It was such a love as honored, protected, and elevated, no less than it gladdened her to whom it was given. Let me now ask, just at this moment, when my mind is so strangely clear, let me reflect why it was taken from me. For what crime was I condemned, after 12 months of bliss, to undergo 30 years of sorrow? I do not know, she continued after a pause. I cannot see the reason. Yet at this hour I can say with sincerity what I never tried, to say before inscrutable God, thy will be done. And at this moment I can believe that death will restore me to Frank. I never believed it till now. He is dead, then? I inquired in a low voice. My dear girl, she said, one happy Christmas Eve I dressed and decorated myself, expecting my lover, very soon to be my husband, would come that night to visit me. I sat down to wait. Once more I see that moment, I see the snow twilight stealing through the window over which the curtain was not dropped, for I designed to watch him ride up the white walk. I see and feel the soft firelight warming me, playing. "What is the matter?" I demanded. Thomas, my own servant, answered by saying sharply, "Go into the house, madam," and then calling to another servant who came hurrying from the kitchen as if summoned by some instinct, "Ruth, take Mrs. into the house directly." But I was kneeling down in the snow, beside something that lay there, something that I had seen dragged along the ground, something that sighed, that ground on my breast as I lifted and drew it to me. He was not dead. He was not quite unconscious. I had him carried in. I refused to be ordered about and thrust from him. I was quite collected enough, not only to be my own mistress, but the mistress of others. They had begun by trying to treat me like a child, as they always do with people struck by God's hand, but I gave place to none except the surgeon. And when he had done what he could, I took my dying Frank to myself. He had strength to fold me in his arms. He had power to speak my name. He heard me as I prayed over him very softly. He felt me as I tenderly and fondly comforted him. "Maria," he said, "I am dying in paradise." He spent his last breath in faithful words for me. When the dawn of Christmas morning broke, my Frank was with God. And that, she went on, happened 30 years ago. I have suffered since. I doubt if I have made the best use of all my calamities. Soft, amiable natures they would have refined to saintliness. Of strong, evil spirits they would have made demons. As for me, I have only been a woe-struck and selfish woman. "You have done much good," I said, for she was noted for her liberal almsgiving. "I have not withheld money, you mean, where it could assuage affliction. What of that? It cost me no effort or pang to give. But I think from this day I am about to enter a better frame of mind, to prepare myself for a union with Frank. You see, I still think of Frank more than of God. And unless it be counted that in thus loving the creature so much, so long, and so exclusively, I have not at least blasphemed the Creator, small is my chance of salvation. What do you think, Lucy, of these things? Be my chaplain and tell me." This question I could not answer. I had no words. It seemed as if she thought I had answered it. "Very right, my child. We should acknowledge God merciful, but not always. For us comprehensible. We should accept our own lot, whatever it be, and try to render happy that of others. Should we not? Well, tomorrow I will begin by trying to make you happy. I will endeavor to do something for you, Lucy, something that will benefit you when I am dead. My head aches now with talking too much. Still I am happy. Go to bed. The clock strikes 2. How late you sit up, or rather how late I and my selfishness keep you up, but go now. Have no more anxiety for me. I feel I shall rest well." She composed herself as if to slumber. I, too, retired to my crib in a closet within her room. The night passed in quietness. Quietly, her doom must at last have come, peacefully and painlessly. In the morning she was found without life, nearly cold, but all calm and undisturbed. Her previous excitement of spirits and change of mood had been the prelude of a fit. One stroke sufficed to sever the thread of an existence so long fretted by affliction. And that's the end of chapters 3 and 4. The story continues tomorrow. Thanks for listening, only on Driven to Win.